Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to those who are joining us from Europe. I'm Lauren Speranza, Director for Transatlantic Defense and Security at the Center for European Policy Analysis, or CEPA. I'm delighted to kick off our event today, which is the culmination of a unique military mobility workshop that CEPA has led over the past few months to help test and strengthen military mobility in Europe across five key geographic scenarios. Today's event is an opportunity to highlight the importance of military mobility to the Transatlantic Alliance, to present some of the initial findings and recommendations for CEPA's workshop, and to help outline the way ahead for decision makers across NATO, the European Union, and transatlantic nations. We'll circle back a little bit later on to hear a little bit more about our lineup today and the workshop itself. But first, I wanted to welcome our opening keynote speaker for today, Lieutenant General Scott Kindsvater, who is the Deputy Chairman of the NATO Military Committee. He has a very tight schedule this morning, so we wanted to just go straight to questions to hear from him to help frame our conversations today. As many of you know, General Kindsvater is an incredible strategic thinker with a distinguished career of service to his country and the transatlantic community. In his current role, he supports the chairman in directing the daily activities of the Military Committee, which is NATO's highest military authority, and also advises the Deputy Secretary General. Prior to this, he served as Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations and Intelligence at SHAPE, and he has served many important leadership roles across the U.S. Air Force and several joint assignments. General Kindsvater, it's an honor to have you with us, sir. Thank you for making the time on such short schedule today. I wanted to jump right in and start with a broad question to hear how you're thinking about some of the issues we'll discuss later today. As you're aware, sir, with this scenario-based workshop, we have looked at 5 particularly complex problem sets that NATO nations may have to deal with in the future, from political issues all the way down to military logistics issues. So I was wondering if you could say a word about what NATO challenges keep you up at night.
Okay. Thanks, Lauren, and thanks to Ben Hodges for the opportunity to address this impressive crowd of professionals in such a diverse set of organizations. Ben asked me to do a 200 PowerPoint slide presentation to everybody, so I hope you have the slides with you. Just teasing. So what we'll do, I've only got just a few minutes, so let me just go through a couple things and I'll hit that, Lauren, that first question. So it's really a testament. I wish I could lock everybody in this VTC room, in an actual room, because I think if we did that with a good couple cases of Belgian beer, we'd solve most of the problems you guys are trying to tackle. It's really a testament to the importance of the work done and the dedication of this team, even in this environment, that you all are able to come up with this workshop. So thanks for that. And it's ultimately a very strategic importance. We're in a critical time in NATO where we are consciously reflecting and refocusing our efforts away from a heavy emphasis on crisis management and those tools towards a more balanced 360-degree approach, bringing in our old collective defense thinking and without jettisoning all the critical lessons we've had from the crisis management decades. This is an approach that demands we take a serious look at a range of issues, none of them more important than military mobility. Our ability to move personnel and material across the depth and breadth of our alliance really is the foundation of our collective credible defense. So as I think through today's security environment, we must start to compete. How I think about it is we must start to compete and contest now. Otherwise, we'll end up with something looking like the confrontation we had in the Cold War. So I've been in this NATO business now for 3 years, 2 years at SHAPE as Director of Operations and Intelligence, and now 1 year as a Deputy Chairman. This is a great alliance, and I've seen lots and lots of adaptation. And that journey to constantly get better is really part of the DNA code of our alliance. And I'm not going to go into that list over the last few years, but how I would talk about it to my mom is the alliance is like having 30 brothers and sisters at the dinner table with no mom and dad, right? It's just absolutely chaotic most of the time. But it is the journey that this alliance to get better exists. We do have absolute challenges that are out there. You know, I think the uncertain security environment layered with the evolving threats that all operate at a crazy speed today is probably our biggest challenge when you've got capable state and non-state actors. I've heard the Secretary General say several times, we must be committed to keep our core functions strong. That core function is a credible military deterrent. It has to be the foundation of what we do moving forward to mess and to stiff arm all those challenges. You know, we're not going to be good at women, peace, and security. We're not going to be good at whole of NATO business. We're not going to be good at any green initiatives, nothing, unless we have that core function as our principle, and that is absolutely strong as we move forward. I'll add just further to that, Lauren. Here's how I kind of think of what we're doing currently to get at some of those challenges. NATO 1.0 was our alliance pre-1989. I would call that an alliance of necessity. We had a strategic military strategy that was our foundation. We transitioned into NATO 2.0, and after the wall came down in '89, that was kind of a crisis management. I would call us an alliance of choice. We're still in this migration from alliance of choice and back into an alliance of necessity, where we had crisis management. We could think through a problem, develop military response options, decide if we were going to act outside of our alliance and outside of our area, like Afghanistan as an example. And since 2014, I would call us going into NATO 3.0, where we're currently in the process and that journey that I talked about of rebuilding the collective defense security tools. So that we, in NATO 3.0, we've got two things that we're really good at: crisis management, which we've been doing for 30 plus years, and we're good at that. And then we get back to being good at collective defense, which is all about you guys' work you've been doing on military mobility. Okay, a long opening. I'm ready for the next couple questions. Thank you.
General, thank you so much. It's great to hear how you're thinking about some of these things. I was wondering if maybe you could elaborate on those last couple of points that you just made about NATO 2.0, NATO 3.0, which sort of indicate shifts in the organization over time, as you were describing. And sort of from where you sit and based on the threats that you just described, where do you see the alliance now, and how do you see it evolving over the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, great question. If Russia continues to be a subversive power and China continues to be this coercive power over time, and we don't see that changing or any indications that that's going to change, I really do think we get back to an alliance of necessity. I really do, where we've got good crisis management tools, or we can go help Tunisia, or we could go do something in Iraq, where the alliance can think and decide. And then we've got collective defense tools, and we kind of rebuild, not necessarily the Cold War package, but we rebuild those tools tailored for the 21st century to really stiff arm and to give the Heisman to compete, contest with Russia and China. The SecGen's initiative for NATO 2030, I think, also applies here. We laid out 3 key principles, very simple principles. First, keep NATO military strong, so we have that deterrent effect. I talked about that in the opening. That's very foundational to who we are. Second, make NATO strong politically. And third, finally, ensure that NATO has a more global approach. As you think about the broader West, the broader global West, I think that focus is really important, because very quickly regional challenges become global challenges. So if this 2030 initiative takes us to a more global approach as an alliance, then we're going to be able to deal with some of those challenges that are not going to be just Europe challenges or North America challenges. We're going to have an alliance that is ready to tackle things for the 21st century.
Thank you, sir. I know you have to sign off here in a few minutes, but maybe just one more question for you. Of course, when we think about military mobility, NATO, of course, is one single entity within a whole range of European, transatlantic, and global organizations that are concerned with security in Europe. So how do you think about NATO's role in military mobility versus its cooperation with other organizations working in this space?
Yeah, there are a number of other, like EU, that are working in the space. I think of it as the global West. We've got to lock arms and get ready for the scrum, right? That's truly what we have to do. And the small little political frictions that keep showing their ugly head relative to working with the EU or not working with the EU, I think we have to just get rid of those and smoothly solve some of those more political problems, so that we can lock arms on some of these issues like military mobility and rebuilding, like I mentioned, the collective defense toolkit of the alliance. Because these challenges of Russia and China are actually going to affect what our kids and grandkids. I mean, we have to make sure the alliance is ready for our kids and grandkids. It did a great job for my parents. It's done a great job for my generation. We got to set it up for success. And I think we can really lean on things that are foundational to the alliance. Things like standards and interoperability. I mean, I just sat in my hat as the co-chair for the standards committee. We've just went past 70 years in that committee. It's one of the oldest committees in our alliance. And it's really the foundation of our alliance. So it puts us all on the same sheets. We do have this global partnership. If we do go more expansive with the EU and other entities that are part of military mobility and beyond, we really have to lean on standards and making those standards fit for purpose for the 21st century, so that we have interoperability in cross-domain activities. We've got interoperability then in all kinds of cyber activities, space activities, anything that we're going to do to maybe on the battlefield blunt a Russia incursion of some sort across multi-domain activities. So building on that sets us up for success in the future. And we've got that foundational committee and that foundational reliance on standards. And I think that really would serve us well.
That's really helpful. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts, General. And we're continuing to focus on those issues here at CEPA, whether it's on military mobility or some of those broader strategic considerations you mentioned about NATO's future. So I know it was brief, but thank you so much for joining us this morning. As always, extremely thoughtful, really helpful to start our conversation and to shine a spotlight on the NATO perspective with regards to military mobility and other challenges to the alliance. So look forward to keeping in touch on this effort. And on behalf of CEPA, General Hodges and myself, thank you to you and your team for the support, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Lauren. Can I add just one quick thing? Treks and exercises. We've got to be able to modify, which applies to your last question, our training and exercise programs into the 21st century. If we don't do that, Admiral Rickover's quote, "You can only expect what you inspect." If we don't start having that high-end 21st century exercise program to include all kinds of military mobility and demonstrate that to any adversary out there, then I think we're missing a point too. And that I hope you guys bring up a little bit about the 21st century Treks program. Anyhow, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. General Hodges, thanks. Great seeing you.
Thanks so much, sir. Absolutely. I think that will certainly come up in our discussions later today, and General Hodges and I have talked about that before. Fantastic. Well, great way to start the program. Before we move on, I just wanted to mention a huge thank you for the leadership of our Pershing Chair, retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who's really been the beating heart behind this effort on military mobility, alongside a terrific core group of experts who we'll hear from a bit later on. We're also so thankful to our industry partners, our prime sponsor, General Dynamics European Land Systems, as well as our partners at Raytheon, Acro Bridging, Oshkosh Defense, DB Cargo, and Rheinmetall Defense, who have been immensely enlightening and informative across this entire project. And I have to say, one of the most important facets of the workshop, I think, was really the diverse array of stakeholders it brought together. Both experts and practitioners from across NATO, the EU, nations, civil society, industry, all folks who work on different angles of the military mobility issue, but don't always have the opportunity to talk to each other. So we are so grateful for everyone's participation and contributions along the way, particularly all of the invaluable data that came from our industry partners. And we really hope that today's discussion will be an opportunity to continue that fruitful exchange with all of you watching and participating today.